In Ottawa with the latest on the federal government's implementation of one of the calls to action from the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. It is Call to Action 17, which demands the government enable residential school survivors and their families to reclaim their Indigenous names on identity documents. The Minister of Crown Indigenous Relations, the Minister of Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship, and the Minister of Indigenous Services all made that announcement, as you heard live, on CBC News Network last hour. Not only will residential school survivors be able to change their names on these documents, but all Indigenous people in Canada will be able to do the same thing. Janice McGregor was listening in to the briefing live and with us as we assess things after the fact. Janice, again, let's go over the details here. What is this Call to Action 17? What does it demand the government do?
This is all about restoring Indigenous identity. It was part of the section of the calls to action in the Truth and Reconciliation document that deals with reconciliation, the need for the institutions of this government to recognize the harm done and try to do what it can to fix things. And if you look at the wording of Call to Action 17, it's pretty straightforward. It talks about waiving administration costs for changing your legal name on a whole range of federal and provincial identity documents, things you might have in your wallet, like your driver's license, but also your passport, your birth certificates, all the kind of necessary records that say you are who you are. A number of issues come up when you start trying to do this, including how a lot of the laws and regulations that govern names and vital statistics in this country in the past have required a first name and a family name, something that is kind of very European, if you will, whereas Indigenous names often may only have a single name. Perhaps they use characters that fall outside of the kind of A to Z alphabet you use in English and French. So while this might seem straightforward to just, waive the fees for changing your name, when you actually get into this, it's quite a complex task. Minister Mark Miller, the Indigenous Services Minister, was asked how many students that he knows of, former students, may want to take advantage of this, and whether there's some kind of sense of how widespread this practice was, of when the students would show up at the school, they would be losing their name and given a Christian name by the people who ran the school. Here's what he had to say.
As you know, the approach to the Canadian passport with many communities is different. Some reject it as they reject Canadian identity. So this doesn't solve that issue. But what it does offer is people that choose to use the Canadian passport can now see their Indigenous name reflected in it, which is not only a symbolic issue, but a matter of profound identity. So we'll see, but it could be hundreds of thousands of people.
So potentially something a lot of people would want to take advantage of. The government here really trying to be seen to be going above and beyond the language called for here, saying this will not just be passports, but also permanent residence cards, citizenship certificates, and not apply just to former students, but to any Indigenous people who want to reclaim their traditional names and their identity that way. But it's interesting, the federal government framing this as one of just a host of things it's going to be doing in the near future based on the calls to action. At 11:30, we're going to hear from Heritage Minister Stephen Guilbeault about another call to action, number 15. That one is about appointing a Commissioner of Indigenous Languages. The government ready to announce some progress on that. And you also heard the ministers in that news conference last hour talking about the progress they've made towards including Indigenous treaty rights in the citizenship oath. That bill now awaiting royal assent, almost a done deal. Updating the citizenship guide to more accurately and completely reflect Indigenous history, and to get the legislation through that has to do with the rights of Indigenous people, the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People, that too in the Senate at third reading. So hoping to kind of make a lot of progress here.
And indeed, as you mentioned, on that 11:30 briefing from the Heritage Minister, we'll have coverage, of course, here on CBC News Network as he addresses Call to Action number 15. Wondering, Janice, something that you raised to us and that some of your other Ottawa colleagues did as well during that briefing that we were carrying live. This is the federal government's announcement, but Ottawa can only do so much in terms of some of the identity documents, driver's licenses, for example, health cards. Those are issued by provincial governments. So how are the jurisdictions cooperating here?
Yeah, and you know, as you noted last hour, we heard from Minister Bennett, the minister responsible for Crown Indigenous relations. There is going to be a specific First Ministers meeting just to go over some of the progress in this area. But this is indeed something where the federal government can't proceed alone. Rules about changing birth certificates, that's provincially registered. Driver's licenses, health cards, those are provincial documents. And various provinces have done different things. Ontario, Nova Scotia, Northwest Territories, Alberta, they have taken some steps to waive fees and make it easier for people to change their name on their government ID. Other provinces have yet to make progress on this front. So we'll see if there's more change coming in the weeks ahead.
Janice, thank you very much. That is Janice McGregor, and she is in Ottawa.
Welcome.